Good afternoon, year two. Here's a quick lesson video on our RE for today. So our last day of our isolation, day 6, Monday afternoon. Um, so today we're going to be looking at our church. Now we looked last week at Peter, didn't we? And we looked at how Peter had become a really important person and was chosen by Jesus to be one of his most important followers, to be one of his most important apostles. And Peter did a really good job. He didn't always get it right, did he? There were times when Peter was scared and he pretended he didn't know Jesus, for example, when Jesus was arrested, but Jesus forgave him and he carried on doing a really important job. And Peter was the first pope in our church. So Peter was the first pope in our church. And he helped to grow the church to help more and more people follow and believe in Jesus and follow God. So he had a really important role. So now we're going to look at how that's affected us now. So Peter's work and all the disciples and the apostles' work got us to the point we're at now, where we go to our church, don't we, on a Sunday or on another day of the week, and we worship Jesus and we worship God together. So we're going to be looking at how that happens and the people who are there to work in our churches, to keep them going. Because a church is just like our school and other places of work. Without anyone to work there to keep it going, we couldn't go. It wouldn't be ready for us to go, would it? So let's have a look. So there are thousands of people throughout the world who do important jobs to keep our church running. Without them, we wouldn't be able to worship on a Sunday. So they're incredibly important to us. Remember, when we talk about church, we don't just mean the big building that we go to worship. We mean the people that make up our Christian family. And here's a picture that helps remind us of that. Can you see that's a church-shaped building, but it's made of people because our church, our community is made of people. Yes, we go to the building, the church, to worship, but without the people, that church wouldn't be there, it wouldn't exist, would it? So the church is our Christian family. So we can split up our church into different parts depending on how near or far away they are from us. So most important to us really is our local church. And this is the church and the people close to us. It's usually the church that we visit to worship and the people who work and worship there. So our local church would be Our Lady of the Assumption. Some of you might go to other churches. The national church is the church and the people in our country, so all across our country. So it's further away than our local church, isn't it? It's not just our local parish church. This is the collection of different churches in our country and all the different people that work in them. The national church is made up of a lot more people than our local church. And then we've got the universal church, and this is the church and the people all across the world. This is the whole of our Christian community in the world and all the millions of people who worship God. So that's the biggest part, isn't it? So our local church is in our national church and our national church is in our universal church. It's a bit like a Russian doll, if that makes sense. Just gets bigger each time. So let's have a look at our local church and some of the people who do jobs there. Now there's more than this, but this is just a few. So we've got cleaners, just like in our school. Cleaners have a very important job in church to keep it clean and tidy. They'll mop, sweep and wipe down surfaces, floors and equipment to make sure it's clean and safe to use at the beginning and end of every church service. So this is particularly important at the moment, isn't it, with the virus? Without people to clean, people wouldn't be able to go and use the church and the facilities and it would get very messy, wouldn't it? So a very important job. We've got the church secretary. Now, each church will have a secretary or even more than one, and their job is to help organize things for the priest. So the secretary will organize the priest's calendar so he knows what things are happening on certain days. They'll book in baptisms, weddings, and funerals, and help to organize jobs in the church that need doing, like buying new equipment or finding a person to fix something if it's broken or not working. So they have a very important job. They're a bit like Mrs. Wilson and Mrs. Wilson and Mrs. Duffel in our school, aren't they? They keep everything going, they keep everything organized. The secretary also takes phone calls for the priest and allows him to speak to more people. So if someone wants to speak to the priest, if he was on his own, he'd spend all his day on the phone, wouldn't he? But with the secretary there, they can take messages and then the priest can call back when he's ready. We've got the caretaker. Just like Mr. Arthur in our school, the caretaker in church looks after the building and makes sure everything is organised as it should be. They may put out tables and chairs for functions, pick up and fit new furniture and equipment in the church, and fix anything that might be broken. We've got volunteers. Now, a volunteer is a person who gives up their time to do jobs but isn't paid for it. So they're very kind, aren't they? Many parishioners, that's people who go to church, in the church will volunteer to support the church. They might help with cleaning, tidying, fixing things, making and handing out leaflets or information, or arranging charity events to raise money for the church. Volunteers show they are disciples of Jesus by showing kindness, helping others, and praising God through their actions. So most people in the church will volunteer at some point to help. Okay, it's really important. And your family might have done that before. We've got musicians. And a musician will play an instrument to accompany hymns of praise in the church. We often talk about organists. Those are the people who play the organ, which is that big instrument that looks a little bit like a piano that you can see in that picture. They are very important in helping us to celebrate and praise God. We've got altar servers. Now, some of your brothers or sisters may have been altar servers before, and they help to look after Father in church. They carry candles for parts of the Mass, hold the crucifix upon entering the church, prepare and hold the Bible for Father to read from, and present gifts during Holy Communion. So they're very important, and Father needs them to help him. We've got readers. Readers are members of the church congregation, so that's the people who come to church, who read from the Bible or who read out prayers during Mass. The congregation often speaks a response when they read. Many children from school are readers during Mass. Our final person in our local church is the priest. Now you can see here in this picture, this is Father Jim, who's our priest. And a priest teaches us about God and his word in church. He helps us to understand the word of God, welcomes us into God's family, baptizes us, gives us Holy Communion, prays with us, and blesses us. A priest is fulfilling the role of Jesus on earth. So they're carrying on the work that Jesus did and that Peter did after Jesus by helping people, by helping them to be involved in God's family. Then we've got our national church, which is the bigger one, our country. So as well as all those people who work in every single church, there's also these people, bishops. A bishop looks after all of the priests in his diocese. So a diocese is a big area made up of lots of local churches, okay? And there's lots of dioceses in our country. Bishops are still priests, so they still do a job of a priest and they still teach the faithful, read from the Bible, carry out baptisms, weddings, funerals, give out Holy Communion, pray with us and bless us. A bishop represents Jesus' apostles, Jesus' 12 disciples whose job was to spread Jesus' message of love and forgiveness. And this is Bishop Paul. So a bishop is in charge of the local priest. So he's a priest who looks after the local priests, okay? The local priests are a bit like the teachers, and the bishop is a bit like the head teacher. Okay, so each school has a head teacher, so each diocese has a bishop, and each school has lots of teachers, and each diocese has lots of priests. Then we've got our universal church, which is our bigger one. And we've got, first of all, cardinals. Now you can see cardinals wear red, okay? And this is how you can recognize a cardinal. A cardinal is a special kind of bishop or priest. So they're still a bishop or priest. They still do the normal job that a priest or bishop does. However, they are also chosen by the Pope to advise him and help him to make decisions about the church. So that means the whole church, not just his local church. But if he wants to make a rule or change something, then they help him to make that decision. When an old Pope resigns, that means quits or dies, the cardinals vote together for a new Pope. And it's usually a cardinal who will become a new Pope. Finally, in our universal church, we've got the most important person on our earth. which is the Pope. The Pope is the head of the church. He's in charge of all the bishops and priests. The Pope decides on how the church should be run and how people should be taught. He tells bishops what things people need to learn about and can make changes if he needs or wants to. The Pope also teaches the faithful, just like a priest, and gives them blessings, and thousands of people visit him in the Vatican every day, which is where he lives. The Pope's job is the same as St. Peter's, to look after the people of the church, the job that Jesus gave him. And this is a picture of our Pope, Pope Francis. Okay, so that's all the people who help in church. Feel free to watch through the video again if you'd like to. Pause it at any point. What I want you to do now, you're going to get a piece of paper and a pencil, and I want you to draw some pictures of some of the people who help in church. I want you to tell me whether they help in our local church, our national church, or our universal church. And I want you to tell me what their name is. So are they a pope? Are they a bishop? Are they a priest? Are they a volunteer? And just a little few sentences about what their job is. So you're going to draw a picture of a person, tell me what type of church they're from, what their name is, and what their job is to do. Okay? And if you're finished and you've got a bit more time, I'd like you to either draw me a lovely picture of a church. It might be our church, it might be a different church. Or if you're feeling very creative, you could get some boxes or some Lego or something like that and make your own model of a church. Okay? Enjoy.